My mother had 2 husbands in 2 different states for 11 years. We found out when the second one died. My name is Lauren. I am 38 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and 16 months ago I discovered that my husband of 9 years and my best friend of 14 years had been conducting an affair that was so deliberately and carefully organized that they had a shared Google Calendar to coordinate it. Not a secret phone. Not hidden messages that required forensic recovery. A Google Calendar. With color coding. My husband's entries were in blue. My best friends were in green. The dates they had spent together, while I believed one was traveling for work, and the other was visiting family, were logged in both colors simultaneously going back 14 months. I found it because my husband asked me to check his calendar for a dentist appointment, and I was logged into his Google account on our shared laptop, and I opened the calendar app, and there it was. I want to tell you about David and about Melissa before I tell you what happened after, because both of them have been the most important people in my life, and I think that deserves acknowledgement even in the context of what they did. David and I met when I was 27. He was funny and warm and the kind of person who remembered small things. The name of your childhood dog, what you had ordered the first time you went to a restaurant together, the specific way you liked your coffee. I had loved him with the particular completeness of someone who believed they had found exactly the right person. Melissa and I had been friends since we were 24. We had met at a yoga class and had immediately recognized something in each other that made the friendship feel inevitable. She was the person I called first everything. She was at my wedding. She was in the delivery room when I had my daughter Emma, who is now 6. Emma calls her Aunt Melissa. I am using past tense for all of this deliberately. When I opened that calendar, I sat at our kitchen table for a long time. Emma was at school. The house was quiet. I read every entry. There were 63 of them over 14 months. The calendar had notes, not elaborate ones, but specific enough to understand. Hotel names. Restaurant reservations. One entry that said, her work conference. All weekend, which was a weekend I had been in Houston for a professional event, and which I now understood had been a scheduled opportunity they had anticipated and planned around. I did not cry at the kitchen table. I think I was too far past the first stage of shock for tears. By the time I found the calendar, I was in the cold functional place that comes after the initial impact. I photographed every entry on my phone. Then I closed the laptop and I called my attorney. My attorney's name was Sandra, and she had been recommended to me by a colleague 3 years earlier for an unrelated matter, and whose number I had kept in my phone for reasons I had not examined at the time. Sandra answered immediately, and when I explained what I had found, she told me to do 3 things. Screenshot everything. Do not confront David until she had advised me further, and come to her office the next morning. I did all 3. I also called my mother that evening and asked if Emma could stay with her for a few days, because I needed to handle some things. My mother, who's always been perceptive, asked if I was okay. I told her I would be. She took Emma without asking more questions, and I was alone in my house for the first time in 9 years, and I sat on the kitchen floor with our dog Chester, and I let myself feel everything I had been holding since I opened that calendar. The next morning, Sandra and I sat in her office, and she walked me through my options. Texas is a community property state. The marriage had produced Emma, a jointly owned home, 2 cars, retirement accounts, and a financial life that was significantly entangled. Sandra told me that while Texas courts do not typically award different outcomes based on infidelity, the documentation I had would be relevant in certain aspects of the proceedings, and that the 14-month timeline and the level of deliberateness demonstrated by the calendar was meaningful context. I filed for divorce 8 days after I found the calendar. David came home on the evening of the 8th day to find the filing papers on the kitchen table and an envelope containing photographs of 63 calendar entries. He called me 47 times between 7 p.m. and midnight. I answered 3 times. All 3 calls ended with him crying and me saying very little because I had said everything I needed to say to Sandra, and I did not have anything left for David. Melissa called me twice. I did not answer either call, and I have not spoken to her since. I have been told by mutual friends that she and David are together. They are living in an apartment in a part of Austin I do not frequent. Emma knows that her parents are not together anymore, and that Aunt Melissa is not part of our life right now. She has not asked why in terms I've had to answer directly yet. She will eventually, and I'm working with a therapist on how to handle that conversation in a way that is honest and age-appropriate, and that does not damage her relationship with her father more than necessary, because whatever David did to me, he is still Emma's father, and Emma loves him, and she deserves to have that love honored. The divorce was finalized 7 months ago. I received a settlement that Sandra described as fair and that I experienced as the financial translation of 9 years of marriage into numbers on a document. The house was sold. Chester is with me. Emma spends alternating weeks with David and does well in both homes, which is the most important outcome of this entire process. I run 4 miles every morning. I have a new apartment that is entirely mine. I've been on 2 dates in the past 3 months. Nothing serious, both pleasant, both with men who asked questions and listened to the answers, which is a quality I am paying more attention to now than I did at 27. Update. For months later, Emma told me last month that her dad's girlfriend was nice. She said it very carefully, in the way that children say things they're not sure how to say, watching my face for information about how to feel. I told her I was glad Emma had nice people in her life. Emma nodded and went back to her drawing. I sat with that conversation for the rest of the evening, and then I called my therapist, and we talked about it for an hour. My therapist said my response to Emma was exactly right. I think so too. I'm still working on what it means to be divorced at 38 with a 6-year-old and new apartment, and a life that looks nothing like what I had planned, and everything like what I actually have. Some days that feels like loss. Some days it feels like something else that I do not have a name for yet, but that is moving in a direction I am choosing. My name is David. I am 41 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 18 months ago I discovered that my mother, a woman I had known my entire life, a woman I had believed I understood completely, had been legally married to 2 men simultaneously for 11 years. My father in Charlotte, a man named William in Portland, Oregon, who I had never heard of and who had believed himself to be my mother's only husband for the entire duration of their marriage. My mother's name is Gloria. She is 67 years old and she is the most organized person I've ever known. Color-coded calendar, labeled storage bins, taxes filed in February. And I now understand that this organizational precision served purposes I had not previously appreciated. I found out because William died. William had a heart attack in March of last year, and his adult children, 2 daughters from a previous marriage, were going through his estate and found documents that included a marriage certificate to my mother. They contacted her through an attorney. The attorney's letter arrived at our family home. My father still lives there. My parents were ostensibly together. My father received the mail, and my father called me that evening and read me the letter over the phone in a voice I had never heard from him before. I drove to Charlotte that night. When I arrived, my father was sitting in the kitchen, and my mother was in the living room, and neither of them had spoken since the letter arrived 4 hours earlier. I sat down with my mother, and I asked her to explain. She explained. My parents' marriage had been difficult for years, not publicly, not in ways any of us children had fully seen, but privately strained in the way that long marriages sometimes are. My mother had met William at a conference 15 years ago. They had begun a relationship. 2 years into that relationship, she had married him in Portland in a ceremony that I now understand had required her to lie on the marriage license. She had maintained both marriages by managing geography. She traveled frequently for work which was real and which had provided cover for a parallel domestic life in Portland that she had sustained for 11 years. William had believed my mother worked in Charlotte and traveled constantly for her job. My father had believed my mother traveled for work and had not examined the specifics of where. Both men had lived inside a version of my mother's life that was partial and curated, and neither had the complete picture. William was dead. My father now had the complete picture. I want to tell you about my father because he is the center of this story in a way that my mother perhaps is not. My father's name is Robert. He is 70 years old. He met my mother when they were both 22 and has been with her for 45 years. He is a quiet and decent man who built a life around a marriage that turns out to have been something different from what he believed it was. When I sat with him in the kitchen that night, and my mother was in the other room, he looked at me across the table and said, "I want to understand how this was possible." I did not have an answer. I'm still working on one. My mother was questioned by William's daughter's attorneys as part of the estate proceedings. The legal situation was complex. The Portland marriage was technically bigamous, which in North Carolina is a criminal offense. But the district attorney's office ultimately declined to prosecute given my mother's age, the lack of financial fraud, and William's death. The estate questions were handled civilly. My mother received nothing from William's estate, which his daughters had argued strenuously, and which the court agreed with. My parents are still legally married. They have not divorced. My father has not moved out. What they are to each other now I cannot tell you, because I do not think either of them fully knows. My mother has apologized to my father more times than I can count. My father has accepted each apology, with the particular quiet of someone who is still deciding what accepting means. I have 3 siblings. All of us know. We have handled it with varying degrees of difficulty, and none of us have handled it easily. Update. 5 months later, my father called me last month. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking, and that he had decided he was not going to leave. He said 45 years was not nothing, and that he was angry, and that he might be angry for the rest of his life, and that he was going to stay anyway, because leaving at 70 felt like letting something defeat him, and he was not willing to let it. I told him I supported whatever he decided. He said he knew, and that was why he had called me first. My mother has been in therapy for 8 months. She has not explained herself in a way that I fully understand yet. My therapist says full understanding may not be available, and that I need to be okay with living in incomplete answers. I am working on it. William's younger daughter sent me a message 3 months ago. She said she had found a photograph of her father that she thought I might want to see, because he had looked happy in it, and she thought I deserved to know that whatever the circumstances had been, he had been happy. I looked at the photograph for a long time. He had kind eyes. I sent her back a message that said thank you, and that I was sorry for her loss, and I meant both things completely. Pro Revenge Reddit. My boss fired me by text message on Christmas Eve. I had his company shut down by New Year's. My name is Jennifer. I am 35 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, and 16 months ago I received a text message at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve from my employer of 4 years that said, "We are letting you go effective immediately. Please do not return to the office." No phone call. No meeting. No warning. No severance offer. Just a text message 40 minutes before midnight on Christmas Eve while I was at my parents' house helping my niece arrange cookies for Santa Claus. My employer was a small marketing firm owned by a man named Craig. Craig had always occupied the category of boss that I would describe as tolerable, not actively malicious, not genuinely supportive, the kind of mediocre middle manager who had somehow ended up owning a business and who ran it with the particular carelessness of someone who had never been required to be better. I had been a senior account manager for 4 years. I managed 12 client accounts. I had been responsible for bringing in 3 of the firm's largest clients through my own professional network. I was good at my job, and Craig knew it, which made what he did on Christmas Eve even less explicable in practical terms. I found out later, much later, after everything that followed, that Craig had hired someone to replace me at a lower salary and had planned the Christmas Eve timing deliberately because he believed I would be too distracted by the holiday to respond quickly and that he could avoid the severance conversation he knew he owed me. He was correct that I did not respond quickly. I sat with my niece and helped her put out cookies, and I went to bed at my parents' house at midnight, and I stared at the ceiling for 2 hours before I fell asleep. What Craig had not accounted for was what I would do after I stopped staring at the ceiling. In Washington state, an employer is required to pay final wages including accrued vacation pay at the time of termination or within specific legally defined windows. Craig had not paid me anything. I had 2 weeks of accrued vacation and a full pay period outstanding. I sent a formal demand letter through an employment attorney named Patricia on December 27th. Craig responded through his own attorney, suggesting the amounts I was owed were in dispute. This was incorrect, and Patricia told him so precisely. While Patricia handled the wage claim, I spent January doing something else. I spent January talking to my 12 client accounts. Not to solicit them, I was careful about that, but to explain that I was no longer with the firm and to introduce them to my replacement and to make sure the transition was handled professionally. What I discovered during those conversations was that Craig had been misrepresenting deliverables to clients, billing for work that had not been completed, and in 2 cases had charged clients for services that had been explicitly excluded from their contracts. I had not known the full extent of this while I was employed there, because my role had been client-facing rather than billing. Facing and Craig had kept those functions carefully separated. I brought what I found to Patricia. Patricia connected me with a second attorney who handled commercial disputes. That attorney sent letters to the affected clients explaining what we had found and offering to assist them in recovering the overbilled amounts. 3 of the 12 clients terminated their contracts with Craig's firm immediately. 2 filed formal complaints with Washington State's Consumer Protection Office. 1, a regional healthcare company that had been overbilled by approximately $140,000, retained their own attorneys and filed a civil fraud suit. Patricia's wage claim settled in my favor within 6 weeks. I received my outstanding wages, my accrued vacation, a penalty amount that Washington State provides for wage violations, and a sum that Patricia described as appropriate given the circumstances of the termination. Craig's firm did not survive the combination of client departures, the fraud investigation, and the civil suit. By the end of January, the office had closed. The employees he had retained, including the person hired to replace me at lower salary, were themselves out of work by February 1st. I did not intend for the employees to lose their jobs. I have thought about that. But I also did not text Craig at midnight on Christmas Eve to tell him his livelihood was ending effective immediately, so I have limited my self-examination on that point. Craig called me in February. He said I had destroyed everything he had built. I told him he had built it on billing practices that were not legal and that I had not created that fact by discovering it. He said I had gone too far. I told him I had gone exactly as far as the facts supported. Then I wished him a good evening, and I ended the call. Update. 3 months later, I started a new job in March at a firm whose billing practices I examined carefully before accepting the offer. My new manager is direct and fair and has not once texted me at midnight. 3 of my former clients from Craig's firm have followed me to my new employer through proper channels. The healthcare company's civil fraud suit against Craig resulted in a judgment last month. I was not a party to the suit, but I was a witness and I testified to what I had found during my January conversations with clients. The judgment was significant. Craig's attorney reached out to Patricia afterward to ask if I had any interest in a personal apology from Craig. Patricia asked me. I told her no. Seuss Reddit stories. My entire family thought I was an accountant for 15 years. I'm actually a federal agent. My name is Michael. I'm 43 years old. I live in Washington, D.C., and 6 months ago I told my family the truth about my career for the first time in 15 years. My family, my parents, my 2 sisters, my brother-in-law, my aunts and uncles, have believed since I was 28 years old that I worked as a senior accountant for a financial services consulting firm. I do not work as a senior accountant for a financial services consulting firm. I work for a federal law enforcement agency in a role that I'm not able to describe in specific detail, but that has required me to maintain a consistent cover identity in my personal life for operational security reasons that were deemed necessary when I was assigned to my current division 15 years ago. I'm telling this story now because I recently retired from active field operations and my agency has cleared me to disclose the general nature of my employment to my immediate family. I told them 6 months ago on a Sunday afternoon at my parents' house in Virginia. I want to tell you about the 15 years first, because they're what made the Sunday afternoon conversation what it was. I had not chosen to deceive my family for 15 years because I wanted to. I had chosen it because my work required it, and because I had made a commitment. And because the security protocols I operated under were not flexible on the question of cover maintenance. I had a full cover identity, a firm that existed, colleagues who would confirm my employment if asked, a plausible professional history. I had attended family dinners for 15 years and answered questions about clients and quarterly reports, and the general texture of a career in financial consulting with the specificity of someone who had prepared thoroughly. My mother had told her friends about her son, the accountant. My father had consulted me about his own finances, because he trusted my professional expertise. My sister had once asked me to review her tax returns. I had reviewed them competently, because my actual work requires a level of financial literacy that made the cover identity genuinely functional. The Sunday I told them my mother was making lunch and my father was watching a game and my sisters were in the kitchen, and I asked everyone to sit down because I needed to tell them something important. I told them clearly and directly. My mother put down the dish she was holding. My father turned off the game. My sisters went very still. I told them what I actually did in the general terms I was clear to use. I told them why I had not been able to tell them. I told them that the cover identity had been necessary, and that I was sorry for the 15 years of incomplete truth, and that I understood if they needed time to process it. My father spoke first. He asked one question. He said, "Were you safe?" I told him I had been as safe as the work allowed. He nodded. Then he said, "Okay." My mother cried. Not angrily. She cried the way people cry when they're absorbing something that is large and complicated, and that they need to feel before they can think about. My sister Rachel asked me if anything I had told them about my life was real. I told her everything personal was real. My apartment, my relationships, my opinions, my values, my love. For this family. The professional cover was the part that had been constructed. The rest had been me. She sat with that for a while. My brother-in-law said, "That is the most interesting thing that has ever happened at a family lunch." And it broke the tension in a way that I was grateful for. The questions went on for 3 hours. I answered what I could and declined what I could not, and was honest about which was which. My family handled it with a grace that I had not been certain to expect, and that I will not forget. My father shook my hand at the end of the afternoon in a way that felt like something being acknowledged between us that did not need words. My mother called me the next morning, and said she needed a few more days, and then called me again 3 days later, and said she had had her few days and she loved me, and she was proud of me, and could I please come for dinner on Sunday. I went for dinner on Sunday. It was the most normal Sunday dinner we had had in 15 years, because it was the first one where everyone in the room knew the same true things. Update. 3 months later my father asked me last month if I could tell him one thing I had actually done. One real thing from 15 years of work that I was clear to share. I thought about it for a week. Then I told him one thing. I'm not going to tell you what it was because it is his and mine. But I will tell you that when I finished telling him, he sat quietly for a moment, and then he said, "I'm glad you do what you do." I told him I was glad he knew. We had dinner after that, and watched the game, and it was an ordinary evening, and it was the best ordinary evening I've had in a very long time.